Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Meanwhile Here on Earth. This program features in-depth conversations with the leading names in the subjects of UFOs, abductees, the paranormal, panel discussions, and the very best and brightest of the next generation of writers and researchers. Meanwhile Here on Earth, the show breaking new ground in alternative talk with your intrepid host, veteran investigative writer and researcher, Peter Robbins.
And hello and welcome or welcome back to Meanwhile Here on Earth with me, your host, sometimes described as intrepid, Peter Robbins. We're going to jump right into the show today. We have as our guests two esteemed colleagues and friends, Ben Moss and Tony Angiola, whose book will be the subject of our discussion, one of the most important, I think, and well-documented UFO events here in the States. But first, I want to bring on an old friend and another esteemed colleague, Alejandro Rojas. Alejandro is Director of Operations for Open Minds Productions. I think this is a dated introduction, Alejandro. I know that you work closely with Open Minds, but here's the more updated one. You are obviously, well, not obviously, you are the official spokesman for, take that back. It's bad text here. I wasn't able to enlarge it. You are, of course, the secondary mainstay in the International UFO Congress. You will be emceeing it. You are a writer of blogs, science, entertainment, and the paranormal. Alejandro spent years in the field investigating anomalous phenomena up close and personal, is an editor and contributing writer for Open Minds TV, and among other things, featured on the Travel Channel, Sci-Fi Channel, National Geographic, and E! He is a columnist for the Roswell Daily Record and a real estate professional in Arizona. And before I stumble over my tongue anymore, welcome to Meanwhile Here on Earth, Alejandro Rojas.
Hello. Sorry, that's mostly my fault because I did not provide you with an updated bio, and things have certainly changed.
Yes, indeed. Is Open Minds still an entity at all?
Well, it is in that it's still a website, a Twitter, and a YouTube that I maintain. So there's no new content going up there. So I'm just kind of keeping all of the stuff that's on there. Great stuff from a lot of our colleagues, our good buddy Antonio Huneez, Jason McClellan, Maureen Ellsbury, some of the other people who provided all that stuff still up there. I have uploaded a couple new articles from the magazine that, I ran across that because the magazine we haven't printed for a long time. So I want to make sure all those articles are up there. And I ran across two that hadn't been up there before. One was by Jason, and it was on Billy Myers. So we had inherited at Open Minds the Wendell Stevens collection, and he was a Air Force pilot who had researched and known Billy Myers. So Jason wrote a really good unbiased piece on that I think is excellent that we posted. And then I think a topic that's kind of close to your heart a little bit too, Carl Jung. I wrote an article on Carl Jung and UFOs for the magazine, and I ran across that, and it's one of my favorite topics. So I posted that recently too.
Billy Myers certainly is a lightning rod in this work, and Wendell Stevens' library, of course, was legendary, and I'm so glad it was acquired en masse, pretty much by John when he did. When I visited the offices when they were still there some years ago, I was absolutely knocked out by the sweep of that library. I mean, people talk about their libraries, but it's usually not their town's public library in terms of size and scale that they're talking about. And as a specialty library, It's remarkable. But that's not what we're here to talk about. You have been affiliated very closely with the International UFO Congress since it changed locations and hands, and now, of course, takes place in the greater Phoenix area every year rather than in Laughlin, Nevada. Where do you want to start right now? Because we have this amazing event coming up at us, both actually in true corporeal physical form and digitally.
Yeah, exactly. So, as you mentioned, I've been associated with it. A lot of people think that I called the shots and organized the whole thing. But as we talked about with Open Minds ran it. So I was one person amongst all those people that I had mentioned and others who was running it. And now it's ran by my significant other, Karen, who bought it from Open Minds. So I've never called the shots, just so people know that, even though everybody thinks I do. But one thing that's been consistent is always wanting to bring new people to the topic or to the forefront. And that's, I think, an exciting role that we've always played. We've always had, a few of the mainstays out there, but partially a function of us being in the field and exciting about new information, and also going to a lot of these events. We want to see people new and different, that have a lot of great information to share. So Karen has carried on with that tradition. So we have a lot of new people that hopefully others haven't seen, but that they will get very excited about. One of those, I guess I could start off with, if you want me to.
Please.
Just because she's also a mutual friend of ours, Stacy Wright, who runs Phoenix MUFON.
Yeah.
She's their chapter has won awards for MUFON several times for being greatly organized. And you know her because she gets involved and brings in great speakers, including yourself, on a regular basis. I've been involved with a lot of the MUFON events around the country, and really Phoenix does a great one. They have a lot of people, very professional. So Stacy now, has gathered so much information putting on all of these events and running Arizona MUFON that we are really excited to have her speak on the Phoenix Lights. We will have other people there to talk about the Phoenix Lights, but she's going to be kind of the main presenter on it. It's a hot topic in Arizona, always is. The media loves it. But I think that, there's a lot of voices that are on this topic out there. And Lynn Katai will be doing a workshop. She's kind of the most well-known for the topic, but there's a lot of other people that have a lot of really interesting stories to tell. And that's what Stacy's going to do for us, tell a lot of these sighting reports that MUFON received.
Tell us a bit about the venue this year.
Yeah, the venue. One of the great things about the venue that we used to have with Open Minds was this resort that was a Native American ran resort on the reservation, the Weekapod there. And what was great about it was the openness, lots of outside places to hang out. And of course, the scenery was beautiful. Well, there's a few reasons. We got lucky really being able to get the rate that we did, because it's a very expensive place. And now they're back to their regular pricing for one. And then they've also covered all that up and made it a casino, all the outdoor area. But luckily, Karen was able to find a new hotel here in Mesa, Arizona, that is at a park near the Cubs training field. So it's really popular because there's lots of baseball teams that come out here and do training. So this area has been really growing lately. And they built this beautiful Sheraton hotel on the park there, across from a man-made lake where people come and hang out on the weekends. It's very close to shopping right across the street, but a lot of fun outdoor area to hang out in, because that's one of the main functions of these conferences. And it's great to finally, since 2019, do one in person now, where we could see people face to face. And that community part, getting together, talking, just hanging out, just that kind of peace of mind that people can have when they're among people that are interested in similar topics. It's great.
Absolutely agreed. Continue
on.
Yeah,
the venue is beautiful. The venue's great, has a hotel, or has a restaurant and a bar right on the ground level where everybody, I think, will be congregating, which is kind of a natural flow out to the outdoor areas. So I think it's going to be a great atmosphere, very conducive to networking and everyone hanging out and having fun outside of the talks.
Alejandro, there are two kinds of registration for this conference. One is to actually be there. The other is to take part online, like I'm going to be doing this year. Can you tell our viewers and listeners where they should go, allegorically, where they should go and register for either one of these two variations on the Congress?
Yeah. So you could go to ufocongress.com. So ufocongress.com, you'll find everything. There's all kinds of buttons where you could get to the same place, but right up top, of course, there's a tickets button. And when you get there, it's kind of a long list of options that you have, but among those options will be in person or not. So at first, you'll see all your in-person options, and then you'll see the remote options. And one great thing about for better or worse with COVID is we became kind of experts, had to become experts on presenting remote conferences online. And so now it makes it really easy to be able to provide both in-person and online conference. And that's one positive thing I think that will come from this, because we've always had kind of an international attendance, but at this point, I know we're going to have a bigger international attendance. Just a lot of people will be staying home.
Indeed. Tell us exactly when the conference is, and again, any final thoughts on registration or the event
Maybe
itself?
a little bit about some speakers. Yeah, so ufocongress.com is where you go again, and you'll see the schedule there. What else? Oh, the period of time, October 12th to the 16th. So mostly a weekend. That's one great thing about our conference too. It's longer than most.
Yeah.
This one's going to be a little shorter because usually we have speakers all day Wednesday and then an opening dinner. This one, we're going to open at the opening dinner Wednesday night, and then speakers will begin Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, and we'll have workshops on Sunday. The good thing too is that, of course, we have a film festival associated with the conference.
Yes.
So we will be showing the films to be judged on Wednesday. And then another great thing from online tools is now, since we have a shorter time for people to watch the films there, you will have the ability to watch them online as well. So
that was the question. Great.
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 Everybody who is there, it physically also has access to the online tool, where you'll get a lot of information, and you'll be able to not only watch the films to judge for the film festival, but you'll also be able to watch the lectures. So as soon as a lecture ends, within a short amount of time, we've got it reposted there on the page. So if you miss it, if you want to go rewatch it, like everybody who goes to a Peter Robbins talk, and they probably want to go back and study and take some extra notes. So you'll be able to go back and watch the lectures and take some more notes, which is always great.
Outstanding. Wishing you much success, and Karen, of course, on this spectacular event. I am sorry I won't be able to be there physically, but I will be joining you online. Hope to see you maybe even as soon as sometime this winter, if I can get out. Otherwise, think of me freezing to death here while you are doing your best not to be succumb to heat stroke.
Yeah, luckily, a couple of months from now, Phoenix will, or even in a few weeks from now, Phoenix will have some great weather. But it is a little bit warm right now.
Right, 100. That is said like a true Southwesterner. Listen, my friend, a big hug. Take care. Love
Same,
to Karen.
right back at you.
And be well.
Thanks, you too. Talk to you soon.
You bet. Okay. So, to the second half of our program. My guests tonight are Ben Moss and Tony Angiola. Ben was the Chief Field Investigator for the Mutual UFO Network, aka MUFON, in the state of Virginia. His full-time occupation is in the field of cloud-based voice technology, also known as VOIP, high-speed internet bandwidth and network security. He's also published a number of UFO-related articles and spoken at UFO conferences around the country. And it was great to see him this summer at the big MUFON Symposium. Tony Angiola lives in Northern Virginia and for over 20 years has been studying UFOs, well, since the 90s. He became an investigator in 1999 and was the Assistant State Director for MUFON Virginia, as well as a Star Team member. For the past 7 years, he has been working on designing and implementing monitoring stations in Northern Virginia that will be able to detect and capture hard evidence of unknown, unidentified aerial phenomena. Working as part of an outstanding team of investigators, Tony hopes to bring new evidence to light with the goal of explaining more scientifically the various forms of propulsion powering these strange phenomena. Angiola's background is in information. Bad edit there. Ben and Tony are the authors of Not of This World, 1964 Socorro UFO witness policeman Lonnie Zamora. The pair left MUFON about 3 or 4 years ago, and we can now find them as the UFO Guys on Facebook. Do visit their page, and welcome Ben and Tony.
Hey.
How's it going?
How's it going? Thanks for having us.
My pleasure, guys. You are both in Virginia.
Yes.
And dare I ask you, I know you got caught in the edge of the phenomenal storm that decimated so much of Florida. How are you guys doing?
Just wet today, right?
Yeah, it's just wet, cold, not windy, nothing like what everybody else got.
Okay. So, the Zamora case is one of the first I explored on my own when I first got involved in UFO studies, in part because, of course, back then, 1964, the ridicule factor, as I call it, governed so much of who could come forward and speak publicly about their experiences. And 3 areas of professionalism that you did not want to be associated with taking UFOs seriously per se was law enforcement, the military, and the sciences, academia as well. Zamora put himself on the spot, really. And I think it's one of the reasons I always held him in great respect, because he probably took a great deal of kidding, some of it not good-natured at all. And you guys, I admire your methodology. You deal with this in a very pragmatic, scientific way, and it's one of the things that we continue to try to aspire to in our field, because there's so many non-pragmatic researchers out there. You've worked as a team for some time, so let me begin at the beginning. Tony, where were you born?
Where was I born?
Yep.
In Aguadilla, Puerto Rico.
And at what point in your life did you become interested in UFO phenomena?
It was right around the end of high school, where my computer teacher gave me this book called Light Years by Gary Kinder. And so that's when I learned about the Meyer, the Swiss thing, and the photographs that were interesting and things like that. And then later on, joining MUFON and then meeting Ben, and we had gone on many interesting investigations and explored many things and stumbled on this, as a matter of fact, because we were at the 2015 symposium and James Fox was talking about the film he was making. Ben had the idea. He was sitting next to me. He goes, I know what he's going to show next. I've seen the video. And then the video never came up. It was something he had seen on sightings. in the 80s, I think it was.
The lost Socorro footage.
Lost Socorro footage. So we talked to him after the fact, and James basically gave us an assignment, and Ben had to contact a lot of different people.
Yeah, that case, the thing that started it was when James was speaking. I think it was at 2014 at Cherry Hill.
Oh, 14.
But
Okay.
he started speaking about Socorro, and then I remembered I'd seen on TV years ago this woman had found footage that her parents had shot, and remembered it when they were driving through New Mexico. They were taken to the site about, I think, the day after it occurred. And them walking around the site and showing the holes, and one of the bushes, they were putting a stick in it because it looked like it might have been smoldering. But I promised James, probably foolishly, I said, I mentioned it, and he hadn't seen it. I said, I'll find the footage. And so there's a whole chapter in the book about searching for the lost Socorro footage, because we called NBC, CBS, ABC, Henry Winkler's company, the UK. We went all over the place trying to get the footage, and everybody said, well, if we have it, it costs, $1,000. So eventually somebody in MUFON had the footage recorded on an old DVR, and said, I can send it to VHS tape, and sent us the tape 3 days after, we published both the back-to-back MUFON journals about Socorro and the search for the lost Socorro footage. So we found it, and we used it in our presentations when we did a presentation about this.
Are we so old that we have to define what a VHS tape is to the viewers?
Ben, to ask you the same question, where were you born?
Richmond, Virginia.
And at what point in your life did you become interested in this subject, and how?
The first exposure was, I was with my dad. I was real young, and this is going to date me, but we were looking at, he was a physician, and a patient had given him a TV that's about this big. And so we're laying on the bed, and I think it's on his stomach or in between us. But the Walter Cronkite special came on about UFOs. And so, that's things on YouTube now, but this, in the 60s probably. But that fascinated me because of some of the footage I saw. And my dad was thinking, wow, that's really cool. And so that's got me started. And then I, started getting all the magazines. I was a big comic book collector. So one from my Marvel comics, I would also pick up any UFO magazines that were in the store.
Well, I hope you saved your UFO magazines, but I hope more that you saved your comics.
The comics.
It's a sad story.
I have a horror story. Yeah.
Oh no! Is it going to be another story about mom throwing them out?
And my sister, I believe, when they cleaned, I was in college. They cleaned.
I don't like where this is going already.
And threw away what today would be worth maybe about $250,000 worth of comics. So.
Were you acquitted of your sister's murder?
Oh yeah, no, they were just cleaning it up. It's one of those things where there were so many that slipped through my fingers over the years worth of work now that,
I've taken us off on a tangent there that I couldn't help doing. You two have worked as kind of a team on quite a number of cases. And when you decided to write this book, you've got to be doing your best game. You understand the value of research, of chasing down leads, of approaching things in terms of deductive reasoning. I think one of the worst mistakes some investigators make, and it's often out of enthusiasm or a sense of self-romance. I'm a UFO investigator. That's pretty cool. People tend to jump to the most exotic possibilities to explain an anomalous occurrence. It's more sexy, it's more exciting, but it can short circuit the research process. And in doing so, you can miss something obvious. You undertook to focus in on this particular event. There are so many that you could have done. In the course of doing this, the one thing that's central to it is a man, an individual who happened to be a police officer in the Southwest in the 1960s. I say this with respect, an ordinary person caught up in an extraordinary situation. Did you get overall some sense of Lonnie Zamora's character, who he was as a person, his values, as you began to investigate?
It's interesting. Yeah, there's a lot written about that actually in the book. We were really fortunate to be a part of this, and a big help came in the form of email from Jan Harzan, who was the head of MUFON at the time, and he said that Ray Stanford was trying to reach us because he was,
for goodness sake,
right. And so as soon as we connected with Ray Stanford, we come to find out that he was one of the main investigators. I mean, there were many investigators, the Lorenzes, Hynek, Ray Stanford, and many others at the time.
Yes.
But he was a really important character in this whole thing because of his due diligence and his ability to help out Hynek. And he knew him personally, and not many people were allowed on site, especially not right away. Ray was one of the first on the 26th, Tuesday, when Hynek arrived, Ray arrived, and he was allowed on. In fact, that is how Ray found the rock that had material transfer, which is a very exciting component of this whole case. You have multiple visual, a personal what should I say, like direct eye contact with the object. There's also a lot of people that heard the sound, as a secondary type of evidentiary thing to investigate. And then on top of it, there was material left behind from this craft. Prints on the ground that don't happen by accident. A second police officer too, who also witnessed the object leaving.
Yeah. You have sent me a good number of images that we're going to be starting to share with our audience shortly. But one of the things I admire about what you have done with this book is it's as good a single case study as any out there. And part of the reason is because the two of you understand more than many people the value of pulling together all of the evidence. So much derogatory comments about UFO research and their reality over the decades has been this kind of fallback position of, oh, well, you can't really trust witnesses. Even if they think they saw something, they might have been in shock. Take a car crash. You've got 10 people who witness it. Everybody remembers something different, as do the people who were actually involved in the accident. So we really can't put a lot of stress on witness testimony, which I object to tremendously in specific cases. One thing about police officers is that they are trained observers. One could say the same about certain military personnel. But again, for Zamora to weigh the significance of what he had experienced against what he was probably in for if he became a public figure in this, I think speaks to his character. Also, again, you have pulled together or reinforced or represented or shown a light on so much of the physical evidence that is supported by the anecdotal witness-driven evidence. And with that, I want to go to the first image that we have right here.
Yeah, that was the conference.
That's where it all started.
Yep, I remember. I was there too, and we were shooting a documentary with Jennifer Stein at that time, finishing up on the Travis Walton case. And it was a good conference in Cherry Hill there. And
that's
James
Lee
Fox.
Spiegel, Ben Hansen, me, James Fox,
Tony Cataldo.
Tony Cataldo, producer.
Yep.
Yeah.
An outstanding crew.
Remember that name. I just haven't thought of that name all the
time. Okay, so we are jumping right now into the event. Can you set us up here and describe for viewers and listeners, who I really hope will buy and read your important book? I would add it to any UFO library. But let's take people back to that day in 1964 and give us a sense of maybe even how Zamora's day started and what he ended up observing, part of which we're looking at right here.
Yeah, so this is a piece of art that our friend Norm Gagnon made for us. He's part of our team also, and he has a new book out as well. So this represents the two figures that Lonnie saw, and it's pretty much a very artistic approach to it. It's not,
Sure.
We're not inferring that this is exactly anything.
Yes.
But it was nice of him to do this for us for the cover of the book, and that's how we used it. Lonnie Zamora, he was on random patrol, and that alone dispels a lot of the hoaxers' claims that this was a setup, because being on random patrol, you don't know when you're going to be called into action. And he happened to be sitting there monitoring the streets. A speeder comes by, someone he recognized, a known young person in the town. So he goes after the guy, and he's not really too concerned, but suddenly he sees this flame coming down the highway, and is crossing over the road and over this hill. And so he lets the speeder go as he turns his car off of that main road. And we actually made our own little video trying to retrace Lonnie's steps, and we almost trashed our rental car.
Oh, man.
Because it really was a rough road, and it has gone, the rains have brought the size of the hill down, and we still couldn't get up it. So
Lonnie was in a brand new car.
He was also in a brand new car, which from what we understand isn't something that it's hard to come by in those days, especially in a poor town like that. So he really thought that whatever he saw was either plane coming down, and he just really wasn't sure, what it could be. But at the time that this thing crossed over the road, it almost took out some travelers that were going by in a car, family. They almost took out their antenna. And prior to that, what a lot of people don't know about this case is that phone calls were coming in from Albuquerque dispatch. At least 3 calls came in describing this blue flame that seemed to be tracing the Rio Grande. So we made a video. One of the things I actually want to do one of these days is make a really good video showing the occupant's perspective going down that river. And I try to use Google Maps to do it, but you can only do so much,
That would be valuable.
Yeah, I would like to do like an occupant's perspective, even landing the thing, getting out, seeing the police officer freaking out, getting back in. But so anyways, I'll get to that. Lonnie is now trying to get up this hill. He's gunning his car. He finally gets up there. And as soon as he crests the top of the hill, he sees this egg-shaped thing with a front tilted down. And I think there's a picture in there that we sent that might. This here is Ray going to the archives. He's talking about the symbol that Lonnie saw on the side of the craft, because when he's at the top of the hill and he's looking, he sees his craft and it's tilted down. He sees what appears to be 2 figures in white coveralls. And when they notice him, he's close enough that one of them actually looks surprised and, has a response that Lonnie interpreted as, oh my God, they saw me, they're surprised. Let me get closer. As he gets closer to this thing, he gets out of his car. He's only about really 30 feet away. The Air Force tried to say that he was like 50 feet away. I don't think they use any kind of measuring instruments. And that's some of the newspaper.
Defense Our Chief then is the local paper.
Yeah. And Ben, you took this picture from the
we were in the
archive there.
We were in the archives of the newspapers. In I snapped like 100 photos on my cell phone, but everything related to the event.
Sure.
It was pretty well known. It got out pretty quickly. The thing about Lonnie was that he, we talked with his daughter, and Lonnie, in some of his later interviews that we have in our presentation, he says, look, if I could do it all over again, I wouldn't have said anything, because it affected him deeply. And it did change the way his daughter said after this. He was much more quiet. We found a couple of friends that knew Lonnie. They said, you never brought it up with him, but if he started talking about it, just let him go. But you never asked him about it, directly. And then we found the guy that had drawn the picture of Lonnie that hangs in the old police station in Socorro, because we went to Socorro 3 times. but he's an artist that lived there, and he had actually had a couple of cups of coffee with Lonnie and talked to him about it. So we got a lot of in the research, and there's a chapter in the book called "The Nature of Lonnie Zamora." So we wanted to give the book readers the chance to see who was Lonnie, what was he like,
Yes,
and how this all impacted him. Because the thing that we kind of got that came out of this was that since Lonnie was a pretty religious guy, and he had spent 3 hours after the event that night talking to his priest because he was so freaked out. We think he got a better look, and I think he's told a few people in his family, but it's just not out there. But we think he got a close enough look at these creatures, which were 4 feet tall because they were standing next to a creosote bush that was only 4 feet tall. They were the same height as the bush. But we think he got such a look at them that at first he thought he had seen demons, which, as a Catholic, that would definitely freak you out. But later on, I think he came to grips with the fact, because in later interviews, he would call them the creatures. And so I think he came to terms with the fact that they weren't demons. They were just from somewhere else.
And they seemed to be trying to repair the craft because they were looking up underneath it.
Right.
And then they probably realized that and also there were rumors, which we'll get to in a little bit, of people that witnessed this craft that we talked to, that said that things were falling off of it. And Lonnie's daughter gave us a few clues of maybe some of that might have been true that he didn't really talk about, because what he picked up and put in his pocket was something he couldn't understand, in terms of, it looked like a motherboard, like a circuit board, with soldered points on it and a microchip and things like this. But when Lonnie got out of his car, he heard what sound. He didn't see the figures anymore, and he was very close. And what he saw was this inverted V with 3 lines either through it, above it, or below it, because he said when he radioed back to dispatch, he says in Spanish, what he sees is un V invertad con 3 líneas para abajo, which can be interpreted, an inverted V with 3 lines below it, like this. But then some people interpret it like this. And then Hynek put 1 on the top and 2 on the bottom, and we have an image of that in the picture somewhere there.
Yeah, it'll be coming up.
My order of the photos are probably, it was last minute. What happened was that I had it all done and then accidentally deleted everything, and I had to start all over.
We deleted a lot of work late last night.
I know the feeling.
And so anyway, so this thing, right, starts roaring again. This blue flame comes out of the bottom of it, and it slices that creosote bush in half. And we have pictures of that too. We'll just slide through later. It's the only bush today that's green there, and it's grown so big. It's the biggest bush growing than any. Travis Walton had this experience as well with some of the trees. And Jennifer Stein, as well as you guys found some interesting things in the trees. So the plant life, the cell structure of plants obviously have some sort of response to these types of energies, whether it's subatomic particle releases or some sort of radiation with a short half-life, And so this roar happens. Imagine a space shuttle taking off, and you're Lonnie Zamora, you're a police officer, you're in the Army. He was trained to lay on the ground and cover your face prone and protect yourself. When he realized this thing wasn't going to explode, he looks up and it turns completely silent. It's about 20, 30 feet off the ground. He said it stood there, hung in the sky for a short time, and then it started making its way over the dynamite shack, kind of a little bit off to the side, increasing in speed and increasing in altitude until it hit supersonic speeds within seconds. As Chavez is pulling his car up, and he sees something, but he goes right to Lonnie to console him and talk about what happened. And we speculate that they talked about it, but Chavez wanted nothing to do with it because he knew about the ridicule factor.
Yeah.
And then, of course, after that, everyone traipsed all over.
Chavez for a long time thought it was a secret military project, and he was terrified about talking about it. But that's another point we cover. There's a guy, I won't mention his name because I don't want to disparage anybody, but he's a New Mexico Tech professor. And when on some shows he shows up and they go to the Socorro site, and he goes, well, it's very easy. It was the lunar lander. And we have a whole chapter on the lunar lander. The lunar lander in April of '64, it had a test for that day, but what they were doing with the lunar lander was testing the strut's integrity. So they were dropping it from a helicopter on cables, and it didn't have an internal engine yet. The internal engine used a stuff called hydroxine, and hydroxine, every time they tested the engine in atmosphere, because it was designed to fly in space, it would seize the engine up, and it couldn't fly more than, I think, 30 seconds. But the first test flight of the lunar module was at the end of 1964. And Socorro is about 35 miles off course from Holloman, where they were testing it. So to think that they were testing the lunar lander in the middle of the desert in Socorro and not on Holloman Air Force Base is just ludicrous, because you would have to tow it 30 miles. And so we tried to, when we wrote the book, we wanted to look at all the possibilities.
Yes.
And there's a point where we go through all the possibilities, time travel, illusion, hallucination. But the fact that there were so many other correlations and egg-shaped objects seen before, after, and during this time period,
Yes.
multiple states, all the way through that road 60 West, that's a famous road that goes through Datil and Magdalena and everything. All of them had egg-shaped craft sightings. And then you had the one at La Madeira, and you also had Levittsville. Is that how I pronounce it?
Loveland?
Loveland, sorry, Loveland, where there was an egg-shaped craft that was much bigger. So there's a lot of supporting evidence. When we were trying to put together all the pieces, the only conclusion you can really come to is some kind of strange object landed there with small humanoids, got back in, a blue flame lifted it up, but Lonnie was about 30 feet away when this happened. So if it had been anything like a propellant from a rocket,
He would have seen it.
would have cooked him. It would have burnt the heck
Right.
out. And so when that thing lifted up and the flame shot off and it hung there for a minute and then reached high speed with no noise, it's like things we send to other planets. As one engine gets you there, one engine lands, gets you back up, and it's just a lot more sophisticated. So really the only conclusion we could come to was that what Lonnie said he saw is actually what happened.
What's interesting too about this case is what's really fascinating. It's 1964. Think about the technology we had. This day, we don't have. I consider the egg-shaped craft being old technology because it made the noise, and it had problems and stuff like that. We don't have that junky old technology today. And now the new models that we're having people capture on cell phones, and even NASA captures, we got, or Nellis Air Force. I love that UFO because it's changing shape. It's morphing. They've upgraded. They've got technology that more liquid metal shape. What shape do you want? It'll become whatever.
Or it's different civilizations.
Or many different civilizations possibly. But you don't see the old nuts and bolts crafts at all these days. In my opinion, you just don't see it.
You bring up a very important point, guys, which is, I think, for a lot of folks that get into the work and are just, open-minded enough to accept the possibility that we are being visited by some segment of other intelligences from parts unknown and advanced technology for reasons best known to themselves, we don't think of them within a time frame of developing their technology. They're all-knowing, they're a million years ahead of us. They've got it all knocked out. But not necessarily true.
They're learning too.
So much of what we deal with is theoretical, and the best we can do is make the most intelligent guesses based on the evidence that we have. And again, it's one of the things I really admired about the way you approach this subject. It's not belief driven as much as here are the list of the possible explanations that we've come up with, and you really do your best to cover them all and then make a conclusion based on your best evidence, informed by the fact, as near as I can see, that we're dealing with an individual here who is a person of character, who was not looking, God knows, to become a celebrity or famous or make money on this. He was a cop. He was starting his day, in a very rural area. And the last thing I would imagine that he would have wanted was for his life to intersect with this event. I think people sometimes say, gee, if it was me, I'd never want to miss that. And it would be the most exciting moment in my life. Maybe yes, maybe no. But in law enforcement, especially, I remember when Jennifer was Stein was making the Travis Walton documentary, and she interviewed Sheriff Gillespie, played wonderfully in that very flawed film Fire in the Sky by the late great James Garner, who was the sheriff, who was the law enforcement guy, who off camera, when Jennifer asked him if he took the subject seriously, that it was possible that this had happened to Travis, he made it very clear that he did. But that, as he said, you have to understand, I'm a law enforcement person. It's the 1970s. It's a very macho culture. I could lose my job because of ridicule if I had publicly associated myself with taking the subject seriously. And I think it's a little easier today. Things are changing, as we know. The ridicule factor is diminishing. But here's this guy, a cop, a family man, puts himself on the line. And in a sense, like you've already covered, his life is never the same after this, and not in a good way.
Yeah. He, the one thing that, well, there are several things that were interesting about the aftermath. Lonnie was contacted. He said he was getting calls from Japan and all these places. He had all these people that wanted to do films with him, wanted to interview him. And on film, we have him just saying, well, I got sick of it. He didn't want to have anything to do with promoting it or, talking about it. He didn't give that many interviews. And he went for a long time before he passed away in 2009, I think, before he gave some interviews at the end. But I think it tells you a lot about, his integrity. And the whole case started with him thinking that somebody was in jeopardy. Something had come down in the mountains. That's why he drove a brand new police car up that hill, because he thought somebody was in need. And that tells you all you need to know about Lonnie right there. Because trust me, if he could have taken it back, he would not have said a word. And when Ray Stanford was there, Ray talked to all the police officers. And sometimes they talk in Spanish, not knowing that Ray, can speak like 5 different languages. But a lot of the other officers said they saw the craft, but because of the way Lonnie was being treated by the CIA and the Blue Book officers, that they would never say that they saw it. And Chavez might have seen it, but he didn't want to say a word either. So there were multiple witnesses. The Opal Grinder people that Tony referenced, they were driving through the area, went to Opal Grinder's gas station and said, "You've got some funny craft around here. This thing almost took the roof off of my car." And then I saw a police officer chasing it. So that was right in front of when Lonnie started chasing it. Multiple witnesses, tons of evidence. And it's just one of those cases that the more we dug, the more we looked into it, the more evidence that popped up. There was another person that wanted to talk to us. There's another person that was a friend of Lonnie's. And it just, the book could have been 700 pages. It just, since I self-printed, I had to get it.
Thinking about what you're saying, the times, again, before December of 2017, when things started to change in the field and the ridicule began to diminish and continues to do so, I don't blame a single one of those witnesses for keeping quiet. The part of me that's an investigator, a researcher that was associated for so many years with one case and obsessed with it and digging and coming up with more witnesses, more testimony, more evidence in the course of it, I don't blame anyone for not wanting to put himself in the crosshairs, not of skeptics, but of debunkers, those people who are so intellectually arrogant that they know that we're wrong. There's no such thing as a truly anomalous UFO. It can't be, therefore it isn't, therefore it's something else. Let me pat you on the head and explain to you, poor delusional fellow, what you're missing here. And to paraphrase our esteemed colleague, the late great Stanton T. Friedman, the question is not, are all UFOs representative of advanced technology from parts unknown? The question is, has one ever been? And the answer to that is an overwhelming yes. No matter how you try to take down this case, which is a very dispassionate word to use for a human experience that is life transforming and not necessarily, in the pleasant way. This is a perfect example of one of those kind of cases.
Yeah. The one thing I kind of was torn about doing it. We'd already published a response to somebody that swore that it was a balloon and a hoax by New Mexico Tech students, and we dug into Colgate's assertion that it was done by students, and Colgate basically, after he said that, had to kind of fudge things to back that up, because we found out who the two students were that he named, and
Wow.
one of them said, and we don't publish their names or anything, but one of them didn't want to talk about anything, and the other one said he couldn't believe that Colgate had thrown him under the bus. He goes, "That's ludicrous. There were exams that week. It was in the middle of nowhere. There's no way they could have lured Lonnie to that spot with a balloon." And we even talked to the Balloonist Society, which is there in New Mexico, about, on that day at that time around 5 at night with 45-mile-an-hour gusts, you don't launch a balloon with two people in it for sure.
And they try to say that the balloon was being pulled by a truck with a rope, and there's no way you can drive.
Yeah, I talked to one of the guys that he has his own website. I'm not going to mention his name, but he goes, "Well, it could be being towed behind a truck." And I'm like, "Have you ever been to the area? Do you know what you're talking about?" And then when he told me he had never been to the area, I thought an apartment complex had been built over the landing site, which is still there, of course. But that's when I realized that, people that say it's a balloon and things like that, they haven't been there. They don't know what they're talking about. And they're just armchairing it from a computer, saying, well, this is what it has to be. Because, when anybody that saw that thing end on, it's ellipsoid. So if you saw it end on, it looked around. And that's what one guy just harped about. He said it looked like a balloon going away when Lonnie called in the station, said, "What does it look like?" He says, "Well, if you look on the end of it, it looks like a balloon." But that's just the point you have to make. Yeah.
A perfect example of a perfectly understandable misunderstanding on the part of a witness who, is just saying the impression they had based on their whole life experience as a viewer of the world around them of what it looked like, as opposed to Lonnie, who did not have the luxury of disbelief in this case. Next image here that you sent.
Yeah, that's interesting because they asked him what it looked like. People describe things, and it's interesting. Back in the day,
yep.
How many objects do you think?
In the football, 60s? Bathtub.
It goes back to the origin of the term flying saucer, which of course the press has had a field day with for decades.
And like Ben said, depending how you look at it, what angle, it could look like a flying bathtub. 1 minute, and then the next minute it could be like a round circle.
Butane tank is what the La Madera, what they said it looked like, which is still ellipsoid egg shape.
Yeah.
Which is unusual. You don't when Cheryl Costa at the very last chapter did statistical analysis for egg-shaped objects, they're kind of unusual. But as we dug, of course, then we have a whole chapter compiling all the newspaper articles talking about egg-shaped. One landed at Hollerman. Guy fired bullets at it. We had the Cleveland case, and we had many other officers. Can't remember the town, that also saw with a 6-year-old girl an egg-shaped thing flying through the air. So to me, it's like, I think maybe a specific, if you want to go this far, which I think is plausible, this civilization liked egg-shaped craft coming out of bigger egg-shaped craft, and maybe that's just one type of entity that was
a perfectly logical deduction. And it reminds me, in my mind, I compare these things over the decades as I've been exposed to more and more case material as varied as automobiles, and think about how many types and styles they are going back more than 100 years. Some work out better and the designs are adopted. They're more popular. We see them more. And that brings me to a point before we go to break. A colleague years ago said something to me that brought that point home very simply, but in a way I've never forgotten, which is he was an abduction researcher and talking specifically about the table, the metal table that individuals who have these experiences are examined on. And there are some extraordinary, simple commonalities of these tables. And what he said was, I want you to imagine that somewhere out there on an asteroid or in some underground factory on a planet, there is a factory and they manufacture these craft. And there is a division or an assembly line that manufactures the tables that go into the craft. I don't know why it struck me so dramatically, but it did. We're dealing with real materials, and again, we all know we're talking about one specific aspect of the UFO phenomena. There are a lot of explanations for other types, but in terms of hard metal technology, these egg-shaped craft may have been in our, calendar used in the 1960s to some degree, and then off they went. And on that egg-shaped note, this is Peter Robbins with my guests, Ben Moss and Tony Angiola. And meanwhile, here on Earth, we will be back in 4 minutes. Stay with us.
Hey members, the new KGRA DB app is now available on iOS and Android devices. Gain on-demand access to any KGRA DB programming. Download any show directly to your mobile device to listen or watch on the go. Go to the App Store and search KGRA DB.
Are we alone in the universe? The most important question facing humanity is on the verge of being settled once and for all. The Mutual UFO Network has been at the forefront of this journey for nearly 50 years. Our members worldwide are dedicated to the research, documentation, and awareness that will shape the future of humanity. Won't you join us?
Discover the Observation Deck, a one-of-a-kind virtual event platform that takes video conferencing to the next level by using avatars to navigate a campus. There's so many areas and activities to choose from. There's a 1,000-seat auditorium, an expo hall, a nightclub, and even a beach. So come attend a conference, take a class, or hear a lecture on the incredible Observation Deck campus. Go to theobservationdk.com.
You're listening to the KGRA Digital Broadcasting Network. We provide unparalleled coverage of trending news in the world of ufology, cryptozoology, and paranormal phenomenon. Whether you're watching our video live stream or listening to one of our audio programs, you are getting the best from world-renowned researchers and hosts, guiding you through topics the mainstream won't touch. Miss one of your favorite programs? No problem. Head over to the members area at kgradb.com for access to our massive library of award-winning content. Make contact, stay connected, only at kgradb.com.
And welcome back to Meanwhile Here on Earth with your host, Peter Robbins. That's me. And my guest tonight, Tony Angiola. And Tony, am I pronouncing your last name correct?
You are, sir.
We're one of the few getting it right.
Yeah. You got
Okay.
it right.
Nothing more professional sounding than pronouncing a friend's last name wrong. And Ben Moss.
You've always gotten it right.
This case, I want to pick up on some of the imagery that you've sent here, that you sent me, and go right to this
This was one
interpretation.
of the first, yeah, Baca. Remember Baca was the
Harold
person that,
yeah,
Harold Baca. And the original pencil drawing had the correct symbol on it.
Interesting.
And the Air Force had him erase it and put
Jeez.
the umbrella one on there. You want to explain the umbrella?
Yeah, originally they told him to erase it, and it was blank. And then in later versions, the umbrella symbol that Lonnie signed, any linguistics expert could tell you that Lonnie's signature does not match the drawing. And I think Holder probably drew that. And the reason, because Ray Stanford talked to Captain Holder, who was the upper range commander at White Sands, was the main investigator on this case. And we have a good clip of him talking about Lonnie and how he believes Lonnie's story. But the son of Captain Holder told Ray Stanford that his dad had said they made the symbol, drew it right there, and made Lonnie sign it, for God and country, so that if somebody else saw the object and then reported the symbol they had made up, they'd know their story wasn't true.
Right.
But if they had the inverted V with 3 bars, that they were accurate. The problem with that was that all the newspaper articles got the inverted V with 3 bars in their articles before. Almost nowhere in the newspapers do you see that symbol that the Air Force drew. But just shows you the cat got out of the bag here before they could put a clamp down.
Kind of like Roswell.
Yeah.
Damn.
But the thing that I always said was, it doesn't matter what the symbol was, right? Everyone likes to argue, what was the symbol? How about the fact that this is quite possibly an extraterrestrial craft, regardless what the symbol is?
Tony said it could mean "eat at Joe's" in some alien language, but
I kind of settled in on it was an error. You know how iPhones, you don't see anything until you pick it up, and then all of a sudden you see something, right? So what if it was like that? What if that red symbol came out of that white, glossy, egg-shaped finish, and it was red, saying there's a problem, this is an error, it needs to be fixed, right? Maybe it's to alert there are other buddies that, hey, here's where we are, we're having this error message or whatever. They fix it, and the red goes away, the symbol goes away, it's just a solid white object.
I never thought of that. But with their technology, anything is possible, and it's just one more possibility that we have to take a look at. This is the photo that is the photo that anybody involved in the world of UFO studies is familiar with, of Lonnie Zamora. Was this taken at about that time?
Yeah,
it was.
Yeah, I think it was published in their directory, the police directory.
What do we know about Lonnie Zamora aside from this event in his life? Was he local? Did he serve in the military? Family man?
All those things. Yeah, he was a family man. He had a son and daughter.
He was in the National Guard.
I thought they mentioned
Army too, I believe.
Army training.
Yeah, and, he apparently was a good cook.
And he was not an alcoholic nor a drinker, not until after the fact.
Oh my gosh.
You can imagine, you're being ridiculed, you're losing the job that you love. I would be drinking.
That's infuriating, and we've seen other examples of this kind of thing. Again, going overnight from living a quiet life as a law enforcement area in a rural part of America to being not just nationally, but internationally known and associated forever in the minds of most people with what for many of them, probably the great majority, was an outrageous claim, because they're not looking at the evidence per se or reading into the record. They're looking at a newspaper article and making a judgment based on, most people's sensibility about flying saucers and the like at the time.
Not a lot of alien reports then. Yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah, it's like, where I work, I can talk about this stuff. And,
please.
They think it's cool, right? But not back in the 60s.
Yeah. I think that's absolutely true. If anything, just the opposite. And UFO investigators also took it on the chin a lot, Ray Stanford among them. You're a grown-up, and you believe in flying saucers, how can I take you seriously? Again,
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
a very thoughtful shot. Yes.
That's Lonnie looking at one of the impressions. They thought they were smart enough. There were 4 triangular indentations that Dr. Hynek said it would have taken something around 9 tons to make the marks that they did in that soil. But the investigators put rocks around each of the 4 impressions. So that's one of them that Lonnie's looking at.
Well, you've just brought up a very important particular, which is the compression test on the soil. In a sense, end of story of faking that, impression. That's a lot of weight. And unless he had somehow airlifted his car over the area, doubled its weight, and then pressed down on a circular pad, there was no way of creating these impressions for sure.
Yeah, the thing was self correcting, because the terrain is really weird there. It's down in Arroyo where you have water that goes through, but it was when they did a diagonal.
It's like a self-leveling.
Yeah, it was self-leveling is what I'm trying to say. But when they did the measurements, the blue flame was right in the center of the 4 legs. And the thing about that was it sliced that creocyte bush in half, and those bushes are full of resin. And for a blue flame to play maybe 1 or 2 seconds and cut one of those in half would have required at least 2,000 degrees. And so that kind of tells you, nobody's going to be out there with a blowtorch trying to make this evidence, but that just tells you how exotic whatever the blue flame was and how hot it was. But even though Lonnie was very close to it, he doesn't really report heat or anything like that. So it's definitely some weird plasma beam with something very advanced that we're not aware of.
There's also some alleged vitrification that was talked about.
Sand vitrification.
And that it was taken.
Carol Lorenza said that the Air Force had picked that up, but that went back to a lab and was never heard from again.
Before the break, we were talking about how that bush grew almost surreally in terms of size. And for that kind of plant, nothing even remotely like it around. I'm reminded that in Travis, the True Story of Travis Walton, Jennifer Stein's documentary, we learn that the forest canopy, and this is a verified scientific fact, in that immediate area where the encounter took place, grows exponentially taller and fuller than the area around it, by the same spirit that I think one of the most phenomenal pieces of physical evidence that is impossible to fake and undeniable if you look at the reality of it. And I've done it in person on location there in the Sitgraves National Forest, that some of the tree stumps that still exist right within that area, you see very clearly that the rings facing away from the event are normal size. The side of the tree that faced the event, it literally pseudopods out to a degree, and the rings are about 3 times as large. Also in Chernobyl, granted that most of us think of nuclear energy and a meltdown as just destroying all life. Yes, a great deal of it, but it also creates mutations that can grow ferociously. And we see that in present day Chernobyl with a lot of the, trees and bushes and things that have grown back. But the fact that bush suffered that kind of burn per se, and then came back like gangbusters.
Yeah.
How can you deny that?
It makes you wonder if what's happening, which I cannot explain, but if the phenomena that we're seeing here, the plant's molecular structure somehow triples its ability to absorb light or energy, therefore it exponentially grows, Kind of like the way I think about it is when you put it like an infrared heating pad on your body, what's it doing, right? It's penetrating as deeply as it can to draw more blood, which has oxygen to that area, and that's what makes your muscles feel better, type of thing. So that in some natural way.
I never thought of it quite like that, but that sure makes sense, doesn't it?
That's what I was postulating.
Next image, another
this
right
is
at the edge there, and we can see some of the burn.
A lot of these photos, we have to thank our friend who found them, Rob Mercer from the.
Yeah, Rob Mercer, when he found the Blue Book files on Craigslist, and he sent us. Yeah, we have some original documents. We have the original classified photograph of the site. I think we sent that to you.
Yeah, it's in there. Again, the picture rotation. I mean, the numbers are kind of not exactly.
There's the one with the police car up top and the 4 imprints.
This is unclassified in the top right corner.
Wow.
It's in. I don't know if you're able to see all the thumbnails or not, or if you have to go one at a time. But you can feel free to just roll through them because they've sent you like 40.
Yeah, if you want to put the pictures up we sent, we can discuss each one.
There's a lot of them. Okay, so this is interesting. As I mentioned earlier, when the craft landed, the front end was tilted down, and it's depicted right here in that top left diagram. And from the right below that, it's showing you pretty much where it landed, where the center point was, and there is that's where it says calcinated rock. We have that, or Ray has that rock, and he seems to think that there is a green looking layer in the rock that he suspects could be the result of the radiation or something like that.
Yeah, this is Ray's work, so this
very fine schematic, and again, a reflection of his level of research for sure.
Definitely. Ray wrote Socorro Saucer in a Pentagon Pantry. I wanted to mention that. That was the book that we kind of updated with our book, because when we first told Ray we're going to write a book about Socorro, he's like, "Why you want to write another book about Socorro?" I'm like, "Ray, we found a lot of new stuff. Really like it if you help us out." And so he actually contributed, to that chapter where we talked about the and the rock and things like that, because it was the only way we could have really done this case in the detail we got it to was to have the original investigator helping us out and sharing his files with us. So that's great. That with Craig Mercer's files, which was 283 pages, basically about the Socorro case. The interesting thing about all the case files that he got off of Craigslist, it shows you how deeply they were investigating this. And even Captain Holder said years later, he goes, "I don't know why the Joint Chief of Staff kept calling me, asking me to tell him what it was."
That to me was really important.
Yeah.
Because if this was anything ordinary, why would the Joint Chiefs give a care? Over and over, they wanted updates.
And Quintanilla was baffled. He was sure he's going to find it in a hangar somewhere, so he got top secret security clearance. He went to all the bases, and he never found it. And even when he wrote his book, he said that's the one that puzzled him, because on camera he'd say, "We don't know what it was, but it wasn't from anywhere else." And, two conclusions you can't come to. Right. If you don't know what something is, you can't say what it is not.
And a little piece of trivia that not many people know is that this is the case that changed Hynek's opinion about ufology, because as you recall, before this case, he was dealing with the swamp gas statement. After this case, he said, "I'm going to quit the Air Force."
He formed KUFA long after.
Yeah, this does not actually look like gas.
Yeah.
So
this is Hynek taking a photograph.
Ray taking a photograph of Hynek.
It's Ray. Ray taking a picture of Hynek taking a picture. But what's interesting is
Lonnie
that they took, and that's Lonnie leaning down. They took several photographs in the direction of the dynamite shack simply because somebody had asked him a question one day about the dynamite shack and who owned it. And as he looked at the original negative, out in the distance, he noticed what resembled the exact craft. And we sent a picture of a picture I found that was posted in Brazil or something like that, but it's exactly what landed. And I sent it to Ray, and he goes, "That's the closest thing I've seen."
What's interesting about this picture is we blew it up.
Blew this one up. There's UFOs in the distance.
Yeah. Some of it might be scratches on the
some of it can be scratches.
Sure.
But there's like 3 things in the sky that look pretty weird, and so we sent those as blow-ups to this picture. And this was 64. Right after the event, looking in the direction of departure.
You can even see it right there if you look carefully. But in the next picture, you'll see that we blew it up. Those objects in the distance. There you go.
Oh man,
so
it sure does. And I want to stress here, these are authentic images. These are analog chemical photographs. Right. These have been through the mill in terms of photo analysis. They are authentic. Nothing has been manipulated here. So if that's a thought in the back of your mind, push it even further back into your mind.
Ray always had a camera around his neck, so he always had
Argus C3.
Yeah, with a 25 millimeter zoom lens or something like that.
Now, here's a perfect example. If, perchance, this is an egg-shaped craft and we're looking at it from the bottom, it looks like a balloon.
Right, on end, yeah.
On end, yeah. It was interesting, too, is that when they took the photograph, these photographs, it was how many days after? It was like
3 or 4.
3 or 4 days after. And it was almost like the ones that we don't have that we want to show people eventually one day, they're enormous oval shaped. And there's one that's up close to that, the legs out, just like the picture we have here that resembles it. It's very reminiscent.
Yeah, Ray just, until he finds the negative, he just won't
I think I put it at the very end of the whole thing. Yeah.
But in the Dynamite Shack photo that we're talking about, and one day hopefully he'll put it out there, but there's clearly some things in the sky, but on blowing it up in the top right hand corner, and I think somebody Goddard helped him. It was
calculate the minutes
estimated to be like 19 feet long. It was about a quarter of a mile from the camera, and it's an egg, and you can see 3 or 4 of the 4 landing gear.
Yeah, and he said that the minutes of arc that they calculated, the distance between each pad per the distance from the landing site, everything lined up. So if that object in the photograph were to land on the ground, he said everything lined up exactly as he would expect it to.
Amazing.
So that was interesting. Also, in that alleged photograph that we haven't shown anybody, there's this enormous pancake flat object on the left that we never noticed because we were so busy looking on the right of the photograph at all the oval shapes. We finally looked and we're like, well, that's not a cloud right there. And Ray's like, I never noticed that before.
Are we talking about this photo here?
No, it's the one that's not public.
It's not public yet. It's more to the left. You know, if we were able to just take this picture and turn left more, you know, there's more stuff to the left.
Well, here we have Lonnie and who?
This is Ray Stanford in his 20s on the right.
Oh my gosh.
And that's Lonnie to his right and Chavez
in the middle.
Yeah. Oh, so Lonnie's in plain clothes. Chavez is in uniform.
This is the one the CIA always uses without Ray's permission.
Yeah, CIA uses this all the time. Look at Ray's foot. You see the shadow? It's over the hole because it's black and white. You can kind of use that clue. And that's the bush that it got sliced in half. And then when you get to the color photo that we took, you'll see how big that bush is now. And it's very lush and green. And it's the only lush green plant in that area, which is really weird.
It's very weird. And again, if some of these theoretical ideas we've been turning around are accurate, it makes perfect sense.
Right? This is what Ben was talking about.
Yeah,
Elizabeth Russell is her name.
This was
that's the lost footage right there.
I think this one was taken by the editor of the El Defensor Chieftain.
This was a freeze frame of Elizabeth Russell.
No, this is from the editor of the El Defensor, but he took a lot of photos.
It looks similar to it.
When we were there, we tried to get a hold of them, and they were in a trailer somewhere. But this is after the event when the tourists started showing up and trampling the grounds.
I don't know if you can see, but there's trash all over the ground.
Yeah.
Oh, for gosh sakes.
So once somebody got a hold of where the site was, people came.
Also, you know what's good about this picture? Imagine trying to drive a car or a truck on that terrain to pull any kind of a balloon or any.
There's holes, there's volcanic rock.
Ben was stepping on
cactus, there's snakes. And you can tell it's the middle of nowhere. Yeah. It is a depression. And if this craft was in trouble, it almost hit the Opal Grinder witness's car. So if this thing was in trouble, it came up the Rio Grande, which is a depression, and then made this turn where it almost hit the car. And then it's in this bowl-like area where apparently they had landed and were looking up underneath the craft, checking something out. So this all makes perfect sense because this is the middle of nowhere. There's nothing near there.
There's really a lot better pictures of the site, too.
There. It really tells the tale very well. And if I'm not mistaken, in the lower left, we're seeing the shadow of the photographer.
That's right.
That's that's the editor. Can't remember his name, but yeah.
Of course, a photographer would notice that.
That's the other case that was very famous at the time. When the Cleveland craft was an egg-shaped object chased by police officers. They started getting calls, and they kept dismissing it. I see something in the sky. I see something in the sky. But then it got worse and worse and worse. And finally, they had to dispatch all these police officers to go out, and they all saw this thing. There were so many witnesses calling the station that this became, and this is in the same time frame. So we just use this as an example that this wasn't a one-off case. There were many, many reports of these types of objects,
including France, Italy, and Germany, and all over the world.
About what was the physical distance between Loveland and where Zamora's event took place?
It's not,
give or take.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you off the top of my head, to be honest with you.
That's okay.
I'm getting old.
No. The lunar module.
Yeah.
And let's just
we just talked about that, but now you can see the feet on this.
Can you mistake that for an alien? I mean,
quick comparison.
If you look at those feet, right, the feet of the object in question, and we have a better image drawing of it. It's kind of like it was pointed.
It's rectangular. It's a
rectangular wedge shape, so that it could break rock in order to get a good footing. You know, it's like it was designed to get down deep. You know, but those pads, as you can see, look like they're designed to more like float on top of the soil.
Yeah.
So there's a big difference there right away.
I'll say.
There you go. That's what went into the ground. And also, what's interesting is when it came out of the ground, if you were to stick your hand into the sand or put your foot into the sand and then pull it out quickly, you'll notice that the ridge dirt makes a different shape as opposed to a shovel that were to go in. You see? So that resembles an object that was pushed in from above, very hard and deep, and pulled straight up and out. And therefore, it leaves a retaining ring.
Well, they did know. I think Heineck brought it up, and somebody else noticed that it seemed to come in at an angle. And so that was important. Who the heck was going to think of? Well, let's dig this.
Let's dig this at let's put 9 tons at an angle and pull it right out. It wouldn't happen.
And for viewers, let's just make sure we understand that the schematic, the lines drawn on the photo, they are defining the actual shape of that depression.
Yeah, to accurate size.
Amazing.
They measure 19 inches long by, I think, 12 inches wide. There was a lot of work done at the site that never became public because they took samples of the vitrified sand. They took samples of the creosote bush that was burned, and you never heard what happened to that. And then when Ted Jordan showed up and took all the photos that they never gave him back, when he checked on that, they said, well, they were fogged by radiation, so we didn't give them back to you.
And therefore, Heineck was able to say, oh, well, you're not going to give them back, but you're admitting that there was radiation. That's evidence. Yeah, it's very evidentiary.
We have Heineck on a film that Ray shared with us where Ray and him are talking, and Heineck admits that the film was fogged by radiation.
Incredible. And okay.
I put that in there specifically for what it says in the bottom right-hand corner. This is the project record card from Blue Book.
ATIC, yeah.
And the conclusion was initially believed to be observation of lunar module type configuration. Effort to date cannot place vehicle on site carried as unidentified, which it is to this day.
Yeah.
So they looked into the lunar angle, and in the book we put the various documents because they reached out to Hughes Aircraft and Boeing and all the people capable of building a craft. And they all said, look, it wasn't ours. There was no black project in there at the time. The symbol doesn't match up to anything that I've ever seen on almost every military device. Says U.S. Army, U.S. Navy, U.S. Air Force.
Sure. Wow.
Oh, there's Ben. So I was testing out my new theodolite app. And it works really well. And any investigator who doesn't have a theodolite app like this one, I think it's free. If anything, it's like $1, but it's really great because it gives you GPS, elevation, everything you need. Cool. So Ben's he's doing some instrumentation work there with an app that he was using. I think it might have been it's like a tri-field app you were using or something.
Yeah.
And
We're just, this is the site. We're there in the middle of the day.
yeah. And the reason I took the picture is because I am aiming the camera in the direction of the craft's exit, and those mountains in the distance.
Yeah.
It's where the Perlite Mill is, and this is the exact spot, pretty much, that Ray and Hynek were standing when they photographed the picture with all the craft in the sky. So if you can imagine, there's 5 crafts near those mountain peaks, and then to your left is an enormous object that could probably have been, I don't know,
about 100 yards
long.
back over, about 100 yards behind the center of the green box is where the dynamite shack was.
Oh, okay.
So we went back there and we found the foundation because we knew the shack had been gone. And when we told Ray, he was incredulous. He goes, "Yeah, you didn't find the foundation." I go, "Ray, we think we found the foundation." He goes,
we took a picture of it.
He goes, "What shape was it?" I said, "It wasn't a box. It was a rectangle." He goes, "Okay, you did find the foundation because it was a rectangle."
Do we know when that structure was dismantled?
I think the 70s.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Or was blown up?
I don't think it was blown up.
No.
Second, it became, I think, unsafe to store explosives there.
Yeah.
Just a little dynamite humor there. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, so I'm in the that's
the museum.
Hardin, isn't it?
Phil Hardin, possibly. We're at the museum, and he owns the museum in Socorro, and so he opened it up after we explained who we were, and we just started rummaging through stuff, seeing if we could find any evidence or information.
He has a great collection of amazing things.
Nice guy. Showed us a lot of history of Socorro.
Cool. Yeah,
And
great
he
deal of
was
Western history of that.
with his friends.
How about that great shot from my cell phone?
And this is at the police station, which became a museum.
Oh
but
my!
This is the actual old police station, and I was looking at some of the stuff in that case there.
Yeah, they have a lot of presentations to Lonnie and things about the case out there.
When you were in Socorro 3 times, did you find yourself at times speaking to regular people, merchants, folks who lived in the area their whole lives, who had a sense of who you were or what you were doing? And what was the consensus? Because for me, that is always a fascinating detail.
We weren't sure. We weren't able to, obviously, to corroborate the stories because,
sure.
But there's a woman there who was on her back porch, and her house was facing the Rio Grande River when this thing came. Mm-hmm. This object came by, and she was the one that was saying to us that things were falling off this object and whatnot. And,
well, she just told locals. Locals told locals, but they didn't tell any press anything. She goes, "Oh, I was sitting on my porch. That thing flew right by my house." We're like,
so she told us where she lived, and Ben and I took the car that we had, and we went.
House is gone.
The house is gone, but per the description, we were able to come down the town right along the Rio Grande, right to the turning point where the UFO had turned.
Where she said it turned and went right to where Opal Grinder's witnesses were. So everything lined up, and it was. We found one witness that really knew a lot, and as soon as we kind of said who we were, he kind of got us out of the shop quickly.
Oh, he was yelling at me, wasn't he?
He didn't want to.
Really?
Yeah, he pulled out his phone to record, and he's like, "Get that thing out of my face!" And some people didn't want to talk, but
no,
we talked to one lady at a shop that told us her husband was Air Force, and he chased a UFO that had blue lights in his.
He was like an F-14 pilot or something.
Yeah, Hornet or something. So we chatted with a lot of people. What's interesting about Socorro is a lot of people that grew up there, went to school there, and never left there. They were engineers. Yeah. Or, even the bartender in Lonnie's day was an engineer, and a lot of these guys were at New Mexico Tech. So a lot of people never left the area. So there's still a lot of people there that recognize it. And the one thing that we got from Lonnie's daughter, Diana, was that a lot of people appreciated the fact that we were telling the story and not embellishing, not changing anything, and trying to get the record straight. Because every time I see that it's a hoax, or even on Josh Gates' show, he came to the conclusion it was the lunar lander. I told James Fox that. He wasn't happy, but it was just, I get frustrated with any case that's, this is one of the most important close encounters of the third kind ever to occur in the United States. And when somebody just dismisses it as this, or this, you can say no. You
Right.
read this book and Ray's book, together. You can't come to any other conclusion unless you're an idiot.
And I'm sure that other researchers come across the same frustration when you spend so much time working on a case, and then you watch it on television, and they get it completely wrong, whether it be Roswell, Kecksburg, Socorro, Kingman. They always make it too fantastic, and they miss a lot of the best details. It's such amazing stories. You don't need to embellish anything.
Yeah, they're so unusual as is. You don't need to change anything about them.
You look at the work of like Don Schmidt and Tom Carey. It's so Roswell centric, but they're digging down and getting the accounts, the mutually supporting accounts of people who were there, who were either children or in the old days still. A number of the old timers were still alive. I'm reminded that when I worked for the city of Roswell, when I was a volunteer in helping to get the McMinnville, Oregon UFO Festival and Conference off the ground in Exeter, New Hampshire, my most recent talk and a great conference, there are people who, the sensibility is, are you making fun of me behind my back? Are you making fun of my town? Because associated with little green men and flying saucers, I'm remembering that in McMinnville, and I was there early in the 2000s. I think it was the second year they did it. Maybe it was 2002 or something. But I had enough time and I stayed long enough to walk down Main Street and chat with people in the different shops. This would have been about 50 years after the event. But I met and chatted with 4 or 5 people, obviously older people, who knew the family, who knew the folks that took the pictures and talked about them in terms of, no guile, God-fearing folks, farmers who made no money on this. They could have sold the rights to those 2 photographs and their family could have been appreciating royalties, more than half a century later. But it wasn't like that. I think once people understand, as you say, that you're there for the right reasons, doing the work as respectfully as you can to support the account, that's when things change.
Yeah.
Right.
Paul Trent, I think his camera was under the sofa for a couple of months before he realized he needed to develop the film.
Well, you look at, Travis Walton's experience. He basically became a recluse in his home for quite a period of time after, with not just national, but international journalists on his case. I mean, how do you get through that? You do it, ideally with the help of family and people that care about you and maybe some therapeutic help. But, sand table.
Yeah, this is a little
Norm Gagnon
diorama that Norm Gagnon made for us. He made a little model of Lonnie's car and made a little UFO there. We take that with us when we go to conferences.
Hey, since we're watching McMinnville, if you want to go to that photograph that we sent you.
Yeah, we love the Trent photos and we love the Heflin photos. Think about that, the Heflin photos, those things were just thrown around.
Ray had done some analysis on the McMinnville photo, so we did that ourselves, and we found the same thing that he found on that photo, and it's a big downflow underneath that craft. And the Trent said when the craft tilted towards them, they got hit by a blast of warm air. So it seems like there's ionizing air.
You can actually
because
see
it's
it.
Really clear underneath the photo. It's like a tornado under it.
Even with Photoshop, if you just do a little contrast work.
Yeah.
That's all you got to do.
Sometimes all it takes is a simple, a setup of several toys to ignite a respectful part of one's imagination. And all of a sudden, there it is in front of you. My friend Jason Gleeds in England is a great researcher, but he also is a model maker. And he's become better and better known. He has a 3D printer.
I've seen it. Yeah.
There you go.
It's great.
And he's amazing. He's creating all of these really quite extraordinary dioramas, the craft, the beings, setting them up just right.
Cool.
And they become more and more popular. I wouldn't mind a set of them myself.
I saw the Hickson aliens he did. That was very good, from Calvin Parker's experience. That's the original classified photo. Yeah, that's that came with Rob Mercer. That's the official Blue Book photo of the landing site. You can see the 4 not kind of self-correcting, like we said, the 3 on the right and then the 1 in the back.
And I believe they said the person took a photo. He works for the newspaper, and that's his car.
Yeah, that's the editor's
car.
Chief thing. But and then in the middle of those rock circles, there's the creosote bush burned in half.
Yeah.
You know, I have to, flashing back to a much more innocent time in my life in this work, a few years into, maybe 2 years into it, starting to go over declassified documents. This was technically it was before the Freedom of Information Act, which came in with President Carter, but there was a natural process of declassification and documents were available back in the later 70s.
Right.
And seeing that for the first time on an official document, Foreign Technology Division.
Right.
Holy shit.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, that's they choose words with a meaning. And of course,
I never realized that when they go through the process of unclassifying something, they actually have a stamp on the top right to let you know.
Exactly. There you go. Oh boy.
So that's another original photo. That's the photo that you saw the overlay earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just wanted to put that in there so you can see without the overlay. But
no, outstanding. Of course, with the light hitting it, we can't see the sharp delineations, but we know they're there.
I like to bring attention again to the ridge of the dirt. You know, that's what's important about the photograph.
Yeah. No question.
And so here we go. There, see how green it is? That's the bush, bright green bush.
Yeah, that's it.
Look at everything else. Nothing comes close to that.
And historically, this thing just keeps being this way.
Exactly. All year round. All year round, it's like that. Every time we visited, it's been like that.
Guys, do you know if anyone has done any kind of bioanalysis of a cutting from this plant?
That's my knowledge.
I sent you a picture, I think, with Ben Hansen when I did UFO Witness, and it was episode 7 of season 1 of UFO Witness. We were at Socorro, but when he pulled out a Geiger counter, I said, your Geiger counter is going to go off because this is volcanic rock and there's uranium in the area. So he detected it, and of course on the show it came out that it was left over from the craft landing, which that's TV for you.
Well, he wanted to put a conclusion on it,
but other people have taken samples from the area and sampled the plants and not gotten anything out of it. So we know that was done. But the Air Force did that initially and never released the results.
I'm shocked. Just to go back to this picture again, it really is. For the first one, it is emblematic of. If you had no context to it, it's a pretty boring picture.
Right.
A desert shot, but knowing what we know about it, it's quietly electrifying. This is important stuff.
And back in the day, in '65, that bush was no more than 4 feet tall, and the creatures' heads were almost level with it. That's how long we knew about how tall they were.
So to give us a point of reference here about how tall is it in this photo that we're looking at?
About 6.5, almost 7 feet.
Yeah, about 7 feet.
Wow. I would not have guessed.
Notice it's taller than anything else out there. There's no reason.
Totally.
There's no reason for that.
I love it.
It should be the same boring color as all the rest of them, and just as short as all the rest of those plants out there.
Actually, whatever they did, they should come back to the Southwest.
Yeah, right.
The joke that Ray always said was they mistook the dynamite shack for a bathroom, and they had to take a leak or something.
Yeah.
Corny, but way to go, Ray.
Ray likes those kind of jokes. Yeah.
That's the official. If you go on Netflix or Discovery Channel, that's the blurb they use for the episode I did with Ben Hansen.
Yep.
What's interesting in this photo is look how much taller Ben Hansen is than Ben.
I'm 6'2". He's got to be around
like
6'4".
6'4".
Yeah. Made me feel actually short when I stood next to him last time.
You think? If I feel short.
That's the Geiger counter on the ground. Right?
Yep. And
that's the film. Yeah.
Yeah. Too bad he doesn't have a face or a presence for television, right?
Yeah, it was fun doing it, just seeing. But we did Hangar 1 and some other TV shows. It's just interesting to see how they do things behind the scene.
Yeah. Well, he also he's an outstanding professional as far as I'm concerned. He also really understands how to behave for the media. He's got a great background as, a former FBI profiler, for gosh sakes. And that show is a cut above many of them that are out there.
Yeah, Ben's a good guy. We always like that.
He is.
There it is.
Yeah, that's something that Tony snagged off the internet, and you narrowed it down recently.
I'm still trying to find the source. What's interesting is on this random day, I just had this idea. Let me search for egg-shaped craft because we were doing something. You asked me to look for something.
Yeah. Sure.
And I stumbled across. I go, how come I've never seen this? So I saved it on my computer at work.
Yeah.
Sent it to Ben, and then like a week later, Ben goes, "Hey, what's the source?" I go, "Oh, let me find it again." Couldn't find it again.
Yeah, the metadata in the picture too is just a reproduction of a reproduction. So there's no metadata to pull.
There's no telling if it's real or not, but it looks cool.
It looks. Even Ray said that looks, pretty close to what we were talking about.
Close. So I'm using it. I'm not saying it's real. I'm just saying it depicts what we're talking about.
Yeah. No, fair enough. That's as good as it gets sometimes.
There's a lot of fluff on the internet.
So, this was. Well, I love the fact that the cover of the book captures this sensibility. I think it's a really important, people look at the cover of the book. It's like in the old days, for those of us that are old enough to remember, if you're at a record store going through records, that cover, if you stop, there's a chance you will sell it. And there's it's a very powerful illustration, although understandably impressionistic. Was this the first major
journal? Yeah, that's the MUFON journal. Here's what the book looks like.
Yeah,
the cover.
Yep.
And so when we did, Norm had drawn that up when we were looking for the Socorro footage. We had those two articles on the MUFON journal where we used the two images that Norm had created. And that's when we had somebody say, "Hey, I've copied that. I'll send you a copy of it." And so a 6-month search turned into it was in our backyard the whole time.
Wow.
That's part 2.
There it is.
That's the Hynek interpretation. So we thought, hey, why not?
We think that's what Hynek drew in the National Archives, and James Fox agreed that that's probably the true symbol. And the thing I brought up to Ray was when we were looking to see, there's an alchemy symbol that's like that, but it seemed to remind me of radiation symbols. And then I thought, well, maybe the inverted V is pointing to, because the way it was on the craft, maybe the V is pointing to the thruster where the blue flame came out. And the 3 bars mean, don't stand here, or you're going to get cooked, because the bars represent radiation coming from where that thruster is located. But I could be completely wrong.
Well, the reason I think it's more of an error message is because no other craft in the history of ufology resembles anything like the Socorro. We've been looking for core. We find egg-shaped craft, but no one has ever mentioned a red insignia or anything.
Yeah, it could have been just not a static symbol, but something that
temporary thing. Yeah.
As the subject of UFOs began to obsess me, I was still actively teaching painting at the School of Visual Arts. I was showing my work. I was still an active painter, but my work mutated very quickly and started to encompass aspects of UFO-related imagery. And I remember doing a simple painting of that symbol, but the Hynek variation of it, not knowing enough about it yet, but just kind of captured, my imagination.
Of us with Ray.
That was like 6 months ago or something. Out of Ray's house. Yeah.
And to my right, over my right shoulder, there was about 20 kittens that him and his wife are helping rescue or raise.
Oh.
And they have tons of cat food, like $1,000 a month in cat food, and they got 30 bowls.
Oh.
So,
well, he's just jumped tenfold in my estimation, being a total cat sucker. My favorite animals on the planet. Way to go, Ray and Mrs. Ray.
They got
That's
more
wonderful.
cats inside, I think, don't they?
See the bolo tie? Yeah. He's got the bolo tie. He always wears. Ray always dresses up. Every time we go to his house, he's dressed up.
Oh, that's classic Southwestern class, and that looks like one hell
You'll
of a
never
belt
see
buckle.
Ray wearing
The belt buckle,
pajamas.
yeah.
You'll never see him wearing shorts or sweats. That's how he dresses every time we see him.
Love it. I've got his book. I would get up to get it. But
I
I've
highly
got his
recommend
book.
it to any investigator out there. Should be required reading because the way
Oh, yeah.
he's so methodical in his research and
Oh, yeah.
everything he does, it's a really great educational book.
He's right up there with John Fuller and the best of that generation of journalists or self-trained investigators who set the bar for a very high level for themselves.
Right.
He's a Renaissance man. He speaks multiple languages. He's been all over the world. He has a collection of fossils that the Smithsonian keeps going out to his house, is like begging him to donate.
Oh my gosh.
Dinosaur tracks and
Yeah, he's a dinosaur expert.
meteorites.
No way.
Yeah, he has.
Well, he discovered the notosaur, which is unique to only Maryland.
Yeah, he discovered the track of dinosaurs at Goddard Space Center, which became one of the biggest finds in paleontology. Like,
Isn't he also
400
working to change pterodactyl to pterosaur because of what he discovered?
Yeah, he's just very observant. He just, always looking up or looking down. And
I love it.
One time we were at his house and we actually got to hold a piece of the moon, a piece of Mercury, and what he thinks was a piece of Mars.
Yeah.
So we had 3 different planetary bodies that we could hold a piece of.
That was pretty neat. Yeah.
That's intense.
Yeah.
To digress for one moment.
I think they had that we used that loop to look at, and it was like a structure, like a crystalline structure that was changing as we were looking at it. Really weird stuff.
His house is just full of. It's like a house of wonders. You're just walking around.
You should charge like tour money or something to go through that.
There's a lot of scientists visit there. A lot of scientists visit him. Smithsonian knows all about him.
What a mind. And it doesn't surprise me. There are people who are like Renaissance men and women, and they don't even need to have been formally trained. They're autodidacts. They learn what they need to know, and then they learn more. To digress for 1 minute and bragging rights here, I was honored to have Edgar Mitchell as a friend. And some years back, several friends were having dinner with him at his home. And he was showing us around, and you can imagine some of the memorabilia on the walls and tables and things. And we go into his study, and I see this handle. It's white plastic, but aerogenically designed to be held, and it's sitting on a beautiful polished block of wood with a brass plate. It's the steering handle for the lunar module for Apollo 14.
Wow.
That's cool.
And I'm staring at it, and I look at him, and he goes, "Go ahead." It's like, wing. Yeah. End of story.
Nice.
That's
here it is.
McMinnville photograph. So, yeah, there's the downflow, which is readily available in that photo that shows you that there's some kind of ionization going on, but that's what probably when it tilted towards the trend.
So just for your viewers, the photo on the right is what you normally see. The photo on the left shows the contrast of the downflow.
Now that is really something else, isn't it?
Yeah, who would have thought to put that in a photograph, that you'd have to use 2010 technology to break it down to pull that out of that image.
That really is extraordinary, right? And of course, the Trents, who we were talking about before in McMinnville. Wow.
We have other slides that colorizes that and shows more detail. And, but we have like a whole presentation on it.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of colorization, except in cases where it adds information and elucidates it. I use a stock shot of the UFOs of the Capitol in 1952. That's colorized, and it really brings the point home. It's the difference between looking at people that were alive in silent films, and then a quality colorization. Although one should never watch a silent film that's in color.
Well, it's interesting. There's the analysis. When you take old UFO photographs and apply new technology to them, data, you can see there's a field around the object.
So yeah, this just shows you that there's it's showing like the counter or the clockwise or counterclockwise rather. I don't know what you want to call it. There's a swirling going on there. and that's an energy. It kind of represents the energy and the heat. It's just a color map, right? So it's saying that this particular area has a higher temperature than the area around it, so to speak.
Yeah, and these things, you know, after working with Ray and doing our own homework, you know, it seems like the real UFOs are surrounded by a field, which is some form of their propulsion, and they're probably creating or warping time and space, and that's why you get not missing time, but you get things that seem to happen over a long period of time that might have happened in a second. If they're compressing time and space, then they can do things. It's like somebody says they went into a craft that was 5 feet wide, and they got into it, and it was like 100 feet. It seems like reality is kind of bent by the propulsion these things are using.
And we're actually going to work on a presentation eventually that has photographic evidence of time compression.
Yeah, I mean, Ray's caught some of this on camera, but there is an evidence that whatever they're doing is compressing time and space, so they're definitely able to manipulate gravity in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah. Going on to our last two images here.
Oh yeah, you want to mention this?
Ray was in an airplane, and this is 1986. I shot these to you because they're Tic Tacs, and so he was shooting. I think it's 70 millimeter, 24 frames per second. This flew under his airplane, and 2 Tic Tacs in 1986, before anybody ever used the term Tic Tacs.
And you'll notice in the next slide, I think, that there's a weird appendage underneath one of them that he details.
And look at the detail in the top right corner there. You know, how fast he's going, the chrotochrome, camera speed, autofocus, you know, ground speed, 435 knots, 2.8 degrees below the horizon, the UFOs. That's Ray, the kind of...
So much detail in all that he does all the time.
Puts a lot of UFO research to shame.
I was going to say, for anybody that's been watching this show with us as opposed to listening, this is a perfect example of what separates the men from the boys. This is a perfect reflection of first-rate research. And in this digitized age, people don't even really think about the complex little machines that capture these images, usually now overwhelmingly a smartphone rather than those things we used to call cameras. And the detail here for me in the tech detail is so welcome. Not that you have to, be that compulsive, but the bottom line is every piece of information that adds to the believability, the mass, you're presenting a case. If you were an attorney, you'd be triangulating evidence or a cop, physical evidence, historic evidence, photographic evidence, witness testimony, results of laboratory tests to build the picture. It's never any one thing. And in our image-obsessed culture, I think we sometimes forget that.
Yeah. And this was 70 millimeter. Yeah. And he even points out that you think it's going left to right.
Notice the direction of travel.
It's going north, east, southwest.
It's traveling at a 45-degree tilt. Isn't that weird?
Wow.
Which tells you that the aerodynamics don't mean anything.
Doesn't mean anything.
Those crafts.
You know who Ray reminds me of is Doc Brown from Back to the Future. Remember when he said, "Sorry, Marty, I didn't have time to make the town to scale," and he winds up that little car. That's Ray. When we visit him, he gives us all this detail. He's like, "Sorry, I didn't have enough time to give you more details." Like, hey, this is great.
Guys, our time has flown by. I can't thank you enough for coming on. Ben Moss, Tony Angiola, my deepest thanks for joining me today. I hope, real quick, where can people find your book?
Yeah, on Amazon, just search Ben Moss. It comes up.
Yeah,
or Not of This World.
We sent you a link, but if you just Google Not of This World at Amazon, it should come up.
There you go. This has been Meanwhile Here on Earth on KGRA Digital Broadcasting. My guests tonight have been Ben and Tony. Do visit their Facebook page, the UFO Guys. Next week's guest is Eric Mintel, lead investigator and host of Eric Mintel Investigators. Stay well, stand up for what you believe in, and be kind to each other. Next week.